Cheers, guys. Epix here. Gonna do a standalone episode with regards to the cancellation of the Rift 2. Now, where I'm gonna go with this may surprise some of you. I think anybody who's watched the channel for a while, though, won't be surprised where I'm going with this. But you know what? Grab a snack, grab a bevy, let's sit, let's chat about the cancellation of the Rift 2. Let's talk about Brendan Iribe's departure from Oculus, what that all means, where the hell they're going from here, and what the bigger picture is. And I think, like I said, my thoughts may surprise some of you. All right, let's start with the acquisition process, because fundamentally, that is kind of the catalyst for all of this, all right? When a company accepts, and sometimes, it's a hostile takeover, other times it's a receptive, open arms, symbolic, acquire us. It's the positives that drive the initial steps of an acquisition. What are those positives? Well, deeper pockets, primarily. That's the biggest. Remember, Oculus had been in this for a while before kind of coming to market. They had been utilizing their own resources. However they gathered them, that's what they were burning through. Along comes a company that makes a significant offer and has deep pockets that extend beyond the offer. Here is a means to ensure that your product is going to make it to the end consumer and beyond. What often gets overlooked in an acquisition are the negatives, because they're not usually quickly apparent. Remember, during those initial steps, things are positive, and they usually get a speech, because I've been involved in acquisitions in my IT career. They usually are given a speech that goes something like this. Look, we believe in you, your vision, your product. That's why we acquired you. We're going to have a hands-off approach. We don't believe in micromanaging. Obviously, if some course correction is needed, we'll step in. But really, guys, it's status quo. It's as before, but with our support. Now, when you hear something like that, you're going to hear the positives. You're not going to run through necessarily all the negatives and the strings which inevitably are attached to that acquisition offer. Those usually materialize, especially if it's a public company doing the acquisition, doing the acquiring, like a Facebook. Who are they beholden to? Shareholders, the people who hold the stocks of that public company. It's a lot different of a reality than a private company. These stocks, these shareholders, they ultimately have the say. And they come in all shapes and sizes and all percentages, minority shareholders and majority shareholders. Ultimately, that is who the public company is beholden to. So despite the noblest of intentions and that terrific rah-rah first set of speeches, things start to change. Sometimes they can stay status quo for a long time, but inevitably, and I won't say always, there are always exceptions, but usually as the quarters go by, as the fiscal years tick off, as the results come in, and there's more and more pressure mounting from those external shareholders, changes are made. And those initial speeches, all but a memory. And that's kind of where we start this tale. So remember, Brendan Iribe vested heavily into a tethered VR solution. And remember, when I say tethered, and I've had some people speak up about this, I'm including wireless. What I mean simply by tethered is that the GPU and CPU doing the processing for the HMD do not reside within the HMD. They reside elsewhere. And I mean that in a physical sense, whether it's by phone or by a proprietary, CPU, GPU within the HMD, That is mobile. Tethered would be wireless. Anything that's driven by a console or a PC. That was Brendan's purpose for the last few years, to deliver that device. Now, when the acquisition happened, there was a bit of a shift, right? The Rift 2 R&D was probably already in motion. They were already thinking ahead. They certainly had discussions internally on what that next product was going to be. When you get that involved in a project, and I've been there as a project manager multiple times, you do get emotionally invested in the project at some level, right? Some people are great at keeping an objective distance. Others, and I'm one of those, tend to get a little bit more involved in projects and the positive or negative outcomes, and that can impact stress levels, right? So when he heard that news, I don't think for a second when they came to Brendan and said, look, we're going to cancel this, that he took that news with a smile on his face and said, wow, great. Okay, what's next? No. I think with much gusto and passion, he presented his counter argument. And ultimately it fell upon deaf ears. And that's a move you can make once. And he knew that. He made that move. He played his cards. Ultimately, they decided to go elsewhere. What did he do? He made the statement he did and chose to leave Oculus. Now, here's where I might surprise you a little bit with where we're going with this. I've said, and I've maintained this from day one, I see VR as a timeline. Much as I see adoption of VR as a timeline, where eventually mass adoption, it's just a matter of where on that timeline it's going to happen. It will eventually happen. We're going to get that critical mass that we need. It's much the same, in my opinion, with the technology. Now, I've always said I'm a believer in market correction, self-correction. Sure, there's exceptions. There always are. There's certain social aspects. Sure, I think some intervention can be warranted, can be wise. But for the most part, I think a product should be able to survive on its own merits. If it cannot, it should cease to exist as a product. There should be no bailouts. There should be no assistance offered. Let consumers decide which products are backed and which aren't. For the most part, like I said, there's always exceptions, right? We can get into automobiles and all that kind. That's not what we're talking about. We're going to keep the focus on VR. So going back to that timeline, I have always maintained at some point the ideal end goal for virtual reality was going to be what we would today call a mobile VR device, a much slimmer version, a much more powerful version, but a mobile version nonetheless. Remember, today's mobile, not as powerful as today's tethered, whether that's console or PC, for the reasons I talked about earlier. They have GPUs and CPUs powered by their own power supply that are much more powerful than what you could put within an HMD today. Tomorrow's GPU and CPU in a mobile solution are going to be as powerful as today's. It's just a matter of when. But eventually, it will be. And because things are going to start moving a little bit slower as we go up in the resolutions, the 4Ks, 8K, it's going to give mobile a chance to catch up. And I think all that's happened here is Oculus/Facebook, remember the parent company, has said, look, we're not prepared to take those evolutionary steps. We know this is the end goal. We're going to leapfrog and go right to that end goal, all chips in, and just push the technology. Keep our R&D focus strictly and solely and single-mindedly on a mobile device rather than two separate channels, a tethered and a non-tethered solution. That's all I think that's happened here. They've seen the future and they've decided to go all in now as opposed to X number of years from now. Here's where the market self-correction is going to come in. Is that going to work, or were they premature? That's their gamble. That's the gamble they made, because ultimately consumers, you, me, the rest of us, we're going to make that decision for them in terms of how many of us support that Oculus Quest. Look, if that first week of Oculus Quest sales is double, triple, quadruple what the first week of the Oculus Rift sales were, in their minds, it will have been a warranted decision. They'll have said, we made the right decision, we're all in now. Who are they up against? They're up against Tethered Solutions, the Pimax, possibly HTC. Remember, they haven't played their cards yet. And we've seen this in other technology sectors. Look at the consoles. Nintendo, since the SNES, which you could make an argument for was their last raw power device, where they went all in power-wise. And you could probably thank Sony for that, because they were really involved with that SNES design. After that, the N64, the GameCube, the Wii, the Wii U, and certainly the Switch today, woefully underpowered compared to the competition. But where they went all in was gameplay / experience trumps power, raw power. And you could argue they made the right decision, because it hasn't hurt their sales. It did on the Wii side of things, but the Switch is doing well. It's doing healthy. And in a sense, they've created their own niche in the marketplace with no competition. Xbox and Sony are fighting it out on the power side of the equation. They've got the gameplay / experience all to themselves. That's if Sony and Microsoft lose sight of it, right? Like Atari did once upon a time, where they were so gung-ho on the technology, they lost sight of the benefits of good games, right? And it was cruft after cruft released that ultimately signed its death knell. So going back to that, premature, right now, crystal ball, we can't tell if they made the right decision. But ultimately, we're going to vote on that with our wallets. And if they can have sales better than the Pimax at that time, then the HTC or whatever other, Windows mixed reality devices are out there battling for the tethered market, if they can do better than that, they'll have made the right decision, because, again, it's going in that direction inevitably. It's just a matter of time. They chose to get there sooner and focus all their R&D on it. So I don't think it's a bad thing, but I do think we don't know what the ultimate end result is going to be. That's going to be when, again, we as consumers vote, ultimately, again, with our wallets. So let me know, guys, your thoughts on this, on the whole cancellation. Do you agree? Do you disagree with me? Let me know your reasoning in the comments below. Like if you like this video. And I plan on doing a live stream. We'll do topics like this. We can chat about it some more this weekend. So those are my thoughts, guys. Again, let me know yours. And as always, cheers.